let's get to the three things you need to know today. First up, U.S. stock futures kicking off November trading in positive territory. Investors gearing up for a busy week of earnings where we'll see results from AMD, Palantir, Qualcomm, as well as others. Plus, Berkshire Hathaway already out with its earnings. The company posted a solid performance in its insurance business. Its cash pile rose to a record $381.7 billion, but the company didn't use any of that cash to buy back shares, and that could imply that Warren Buffett still thinks the stock is too overvalued. Buffett, remember, he's planning to step down from his role as CEO at the end of this year. He'll transition to a chairman role, and Greg Abel will take over as CEO after that. And a massive deal in the consumer goods space. Kimberly-Clark will purchase Tylenol maker Kenvue for $40 billion. Kimberly-Clark says the combination will allow it to surpass Unilever to become the second biggest seller of health and wellness products. Now, that deal will bring together Kenvue's brands, including Neutrogena, Listerine, Benadryl, with Kimberly-Clark's Huggies, Kleenex, and Scott toilet paper. Let's get a check-in on stock futures right now. We're seeing a mixed picture for the moment after we saw October as the sixth consecutive month to see gains for the markets. We see right now the Dow pulling back, indicating a slightly lower open. The S&P 500 indicating a gain of about 0.4% at the open, and the NASDAQ 100 pointing to a gain of about 0.8%. Let's dig more into our top stories of the day now. More earnings on deck with results expected from Palantir, AMD, and Qualcomm. Tesla shareholders set to vote on Musk's $1 trillion pay package, and Fed officials casting doubt on a rate cut in December. Joining me now, tech editor Dan Howley, senior autos reporter Praf Subramanian, and Federal Reserve correspondent Jennifer Schonberger. Jen, we're going to start with you and the rhetoric that is continuing sort of back and forth around the Fed and whether indeed it is going to cut interest rates again before the end of the year.
Yeah, Julie, just to set the stage for viewers, last week, Fed Chair Jay Powell said during his press conference that there's a lot of division within the committee about whether they want to cut rates again in December. He said it's not a foregone conclusion. In fact, quote, far from it. He said now that the Fed has cut 2 times in a row, there's a feeling that they're 150 basis points closer to neutral on the Fed funds rate. That's a level designed to neither spur nor slow economic growth. And that there is a growing chorus on the committee that says perhaps we should wait. Well, Friday, we got some of that chorus colored in. Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack said that she would have preferred to have held rates steady last week. She has more concerns about inflation than the employment side of the dual mandate. She says she's hearing more about inflation concerns in her district and that they're closer, she believes, to her estimate of neutral. And so she seems to be in favor of holding rates in December as well. We also heard from Lori Logan of the Dallas Fed, who said that cutting interest rates was not what was called for given inflation. She doesn't think that the Fed needs to take preemptive action to cut rates again in December at this point. Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic said he was convinced to cut interest rates, but warned that the Fed needs to be very careful going forward about cutting rates further because inflation remains well above the Fed's 2% target. We also heard from Kansas City Fed President Jeff Schmidt, who we know dissented because he preferred to hold interest rates steady last week. And he was out with a statement essentially saying that he thinks that cutting rates further could ignite inflation. On the flip side, Fed Governor Chris Waller was in favor of cutting rates, voted to cut in favor of rates, I should say, last week, and said it poured cold water on Fed Chair Jay Powell's analogy of driving through the fog and needing to slow down. He believes that the Fed does have enough data here right now and that they should cut again in December. Today, we're going to get more color from Fed officials. I'm going to be talking exclusively with Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee at 10 a.m. this morning right here on Yahoo Finance. We're also separately going to hear from San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly, as well as Fed Governor Lisa Cook this afternoon.
Jen, thank you. Looking forward to your conversation with Austin Goolsbee. And let's talk about the earnings that we are awaiting this week as well. Dan, we got some more big tech to look ahead to, and we'll start to hear from some of the chip makers.
Yeah, that's right. We have Qualcomm, AMD, and then obviously Palantir coming today. Qualcomm and AMD looking for any kind of bright spot with regards to AI. We're going to see perhaps the impact of some of those major deals that AMD signed in the prior quarter. They're working with OpenAI as well as a slew of other companies trying to kind of wrestle some market share away from NVIDIA, which crossed the $5 trillion mark last week on that news that they were going to be potentially back in China. They also had a few other announcements at their GTC in Washington, D.C. But for AMD, it really is about trying to ensure that it continues to be a part of the AI conversation. They obviously will, but it's also about wrestling that market share away with their new chips. For Qualcomm, it's about, okay, you've announced that you're getting into the AI data center game with your own AI accelerators. What does that look like going forward? We're not going to see any revenue from that in the prior quarter, the one that's being reported. So, what kind of light or kind of information can CEO Cristiano Amon give us with regards to how that may look going forward? Is this going to be a huge driver out of the gate? Is this just another part of the company's bid to kind of expand beyond its heavy reliance on the smartphone space? How does that look? And then for Palantir, obviously, we're looking to see what kind of federal contracts they've signed, what kind of commercial contracts they've signed. It's a huge business for them as well, and where they see AI going for them. We talk about NVIDIA, the hyperscalers and whatnot, but Palantir, obviously, a huge AI play as well.
Indeed, yes, and on one that a lot of retail investors watch very, very closely. Frequent trender on yahoofinance.com. And then there's another one that is a very frequent trender, and that is Tesla. And Pras, I know you're watching this situation closely towards the end of the week, the vote on Elon Musk's pay package.
Yeah, the $1 trillion day is coming up on Thursday. It's the day of the general meeting, so we'll hear about the results then. Tesla chair Robin Denholm has been out drumming up votes for Elon's pay package, which is, a little unusual here, claiming that shareholders need to reward and motivate Elon to build things like AI at Tesla, like Dan had mentioned, the big AI play, right? So, or Elon says he might take his ball and go home. The question is, should shareholders believe that? And I think there could be, maybe there's a better way to give control of Tesla without what could be a $1 trillion pay package. That's the big question here. I want to note a few other items up for vote. 3 board members, Ira Edenprice, Joe Gebbia, and Kathleen Wilson-Thompson are also up for vote. And also XAI investment. Elon has said that he wanted to put that to the board members. A shareholder has submitted that proposal. So the board is not making a recommendation, but there could be some sort of investment potential made there between Tesla and XAI.
And we'll be looking ahead to all of these events over the course of the week, and Jen's interview coming up in just about an hour. Dan, Pras, Jennifer, thank you very much. I want to bring you some breaking news here that has to do with Amazon. We're going to check in on those shares, which are moving higher on news that OpenAI has signed a $38 billion deal with Amazon Web Services, and it will immediately start accessing NVIDIA's graphics processing units, GPUs, as part of this deal. Now, Amazon shares had originally taken a sort of more of a pop up here. Now they're only up by about 0.4% as investors look through this news, try to figure out exactly what to make of it. So just to parse this a little bit, OpenAI, of course, has a number of different cloud providers. Amazon will not be the exclusive one. We already have Microsoft and Oracle and Google that provide cloud services to OpenAI. And in this sort of all of the above environment where OpenAI has a lot of demand for this type of computing power, and we see all of these hyperscalers just spending more and more money in order to build out their computing power to cater to the likes of OpenAI and the other generative AI providers. This is the kind of environment where we see where it's about signing up as much capacity as is possible. Remember, last week alone, from the various hyperscalers, we got a combined $400 billion in announced CapEx for 2025. So this sort of going hand in hand with some of that activity to fuel the computing power for the likes of OpenAI. And Matt Garman, the AWS CEO, out with a statement saying, as OpenAI continues to push the boundaries of what's possible, AWS's best-in-class infrastructure will serve as a backbone for their AI ambitions. Now, AWS is sort of late to this party. As I mentioned, a number of the other cloud providers have already partnered up with OpenAI, but I suppose better late than never. So we're continuing to watch those shares. Actually, I'm going to check on the shares on yahoofinance.com as well. Yeah, that's interesting that we're only seeing that 0.4%. We'll keep an eye on that and we'll update you as we get further developments. Coming up next, we'll get you a check on trending tickers and a check, a little bit of a deeper one, into Berkshire Hathaway. We'll be right back. Now time for some of today's trending tickers. We are watching Kimberly-Clark, Iron, and Pfizer. First up, Kimberly-Clark. The consumer giant will purchase Tylenol maker Kenvue for $40 billion. Kimberly-Clark says the combination will allow it to surpass Unilever to become the second biggest seller of health and wellness products. In addition to Tylenol, Kenvue's portfolio includes Neutrogena, Listerine, Benadryl, and more. Kimberly-Clark's brands, for its part, include Kleenex and Cottonelle toilet paper. So we'll be watching those companies closely. Next up, we got Iron. It's striking a $9.7 billion deal with Microsoft. The tech giant will purchase AI cloud capacity from the Australian data center company and become its largest customer. Now, Iron's based in Australia, but has a number of data centers in the US, and it's a so-called neo-cloud company, which operates data centers that specialize in AI. Its shares already up more than 500% this year. And finally, Pfizer. It's suing to block Novo Nordisk's bid for obesity startup Metsera. Pfizer initially filed a lawsuit on Friday to halt the competing bid, and it has filed a second lawsuit today. The company is accusing Novo of using its proposed acquisition of Metsera to stifle competition in the GLP-1 drug market. But the clock's ticking for Pfizer. Unless the court grants the restraining order, the company has until tomorrow to offer a counter bid for Metsera or walk away from that deal. As always, you can scan the QR code below to track the best and worst performing stocks with Yahoo Finance's trending tickers page. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway saw its cash pile soar to a record $381.7 billion in the third quarter. Meanwhile, its operating earnings surged by 34% year over year. The big focus for investors, though, remains Warren Buffett's succession and the lack of share buybacks. Joining us to break it all down, Kathy Seifert of CFRA. Kathy, it's good to see you. Let's talk first of all about the quarter, and then we can get to sort of the bigger picture questions, if you will. It seems like insurance numbers boosted earnings overall in the quarter, Kathy, and that seems to be sort of just a quirk of the hurricane season that had been mild so far.
Right. I mean, the third quarter of this year kind of set a record. It was the first time in over a decade that a named hurricane did not land on U.S. shores. And the absence of significant catastrophes boosted Berkshire's results as well as those of other insurers. So, when you look at these quarterly numbers, they look really good, and the stock is indicated to open higher. A lot of them are sort of one-off events, not necessarily sustainable trends.
And it's speaking of one-off events, I guess, as well, is the cadence of M&A that Berkshire has been doing. It did some deals earlier in the year and then nothing, right? So what do you think all of this implies?
Well, I mean, you have a company at an inflection point. At the same time, you sort of have a stock market and an economy at an inflection point. They did announce the OxyChem acquisition. That's going to take about a little under $10 billion. I mean, compared to the cash hoard, it's a drop in the bucket. And so I think, there are a couple of things that stood out to me this quarter. Not only not really the lack of M&A activity, but my sense is that once Greg Abel takes the helm, we might have a better sense of the cadence of M&A. At least I think that's what investors are hoping for, a little more clarity, a little more transparency, a little more information. But not only did they not acquire external companies, they haven't bought back any of their own shares this year through the 9 months. And, I think that's kind of a big deal. It sends, in my opinion, a message that they don't think their shares are undervalued. So if they don't think they're undervalued, why should we?
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's sort of the thinking among some investors here, Kathy. But do you think we're going to get anything dramatically different from Greg Abel on these fronts?
You know, that's the big question. And my sense is probably not. But I do think that people are waiting to get a sense of how he'll put his stamp on operations. And I think there's an assumption that he's going to want to bring in, you know, his team. It may not necessarily, it may not necessarily percolate up to the point where it's commonly, you know, seen that he's making these changes. But I think that, you know, the sense on most of the people who follow this company is that people are waiting to see how Greg will differ. I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be materially different, but I do think he's likely to put his own stamp on operations, whether or not that's tightening up some of the controls, maybe being a little more transparent, maybe having a more structured acquisition program. We're going to have to wait and see. And I think some of that uncertainty is also weighing on the shares.
Do you think we're going to kind of move sideways then until we get that kind of update from him?
I mean, when you look at the results, so bottom line results really beat consensus. But as I said, it was a lot of kind of one-off things. Heading into next year, you've got an insurance environment that's more competitive. You've got Berkshire year to date this year only grew their top line operating revenues by a fraction, like 0.3%. Investment income, which is a big component of revenues, is likely to not grow as fast next year if Treasury yields decline, as, you know, people are expecting them to. So, you know, on the one hand, I think you can say that Buffett is leaving him with a company that's in good shape, albeit as at an inflection point. On the other hand, I think we're heading into 2026 with a number of uncertainties related to the company.
Yeah, it sounds like there are quite a few outstanding questions on that front. Kathy, good to see you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Coming up on Yahoo Finance is Opening Bid, hosted by executive editor Brian Sazzi. Saz, what's coming up today?
I want to tell the world about your egg bites. You made this newsroom, Julie. I'm going to give Brian Nickel email today and send a photo of these things. I mean, those were darn good. But besides that feedback, Julie, we're going to dive into all things Tesla vote for Elon Musk coming up later this week. We're going to talk about some tariffs, a little reaction from President Trump's 60 Minutes interview. We got a lot going on, Julie. Hopefully I get it all done quickly so I could have some more egg bites.
I don't think I can make those egg bites at scale, so I'm not going
Don't
to work for Starbucks anytime
soon. Don't sell
soon.
yourself short, friend.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the feedback. That does it for Morning Brief.